Tales of a Trickster, Book 1. Written by Karl O'Kelly. Narrated by Joshua Ward. A Tigers and Bears publication. Prologue. A Guide to Fae-Maryland. As told by Old Bean.
Come closer, young ones. Let me tell you about a place you will not find on an ordinary map. It is called Fae-Maryland, and it sits beside our world, though most people walk past its doorways without ever knowing. You might have stood at its edge without realizing it. An odd tree in the woods, a ring of mushrooms in a field, or a rainbow that touched the ground but slipped away when you chased it. Each of these can be an entrance. In Fae-Maryland, magic is part of daily life. Fairies move like sparks between flowers. Goblins build clever things in hidden workshops, and dragons guard treasures in mountains and caves. The land itself changes with the seasons. Valleys whisper. Rivers sometimes flow upward, and the rainbow mountains shift their colours by the hour. Magic there follows rules of its own. Promises must be kept. Names carry power, and time moves strangely. A day in that world may only be a moment here, or it may last 100 years. Those who live in Fae-Maryland often find themselves changed by it. Pride may turn to humility. Greed may give way to generosity, and those who keep to themselves often discover the worth of companionship. How do I know all this? I have listened to travellers who stumbled across its borders, and to dreamers who caught glimpses of it in their sleep, and perhaps, long ago, I walked there myself when my step was quicker than it is now. Sometimes, when the fire burns low, I still feel the breath of that world on my cheek. But you've not come to hear about me. You're waiting for a story of Herman Green. Oh, he was the cleverest leprechaun to wear a green hat. A trickster who left behind laughter and lessons. Tonight, you will hear how he began, how he lost more than he ever expected, and how he found something greater than gold in return. So, sit close to the fire. The night is young, and Fae-Maryland is nearer than you think.
The fire crackles. Shadows dance on weathered walls, and Old Bean's eyes gleam with secrets that span far more years than his weathered face should hold. Chapter 1. The Tale of Herman Green. The fire in the inn's hearth blazed high, filling the room with a warmth that crackled and hissed. Its flames threw long shadows that leapt and swayed across the timber walls. Outside, the autumn wind came rushing down from the hills, battering the shutters with such force that they rattled in their hinges. A few children jumped at the sound and pressed closer to the fire, their small faces lit orange by the glow. Old Bean sat with his back to the hearth, a steaming mug of spiced cider resting in his crooked hands. He did not start his tale at once. Instead, he let the storm do its work. He watched the way the children leaned together, half afraid and half eager, their ears ready for whatever he might say. Nights like this belonged to him. The stories came easier when the world outside roared and the room within grew still. There was something about Old Bean that set him apart from the other elders of the village. His face was more weathered than theirs, his shoulders more bent, yet there was a spark in him that age had not touched. Some whispered he had been telling these tales for generations, that their own grandparents had once sat at his knee and listened as wide-eyed as the children before him now. His eyes, curious things flecked with green, seemed to hold secrets no one else could claim.
"That'll be the wild hunt passing through," Old Bean said at last, his voice low and even as the shutters shuddered once more. "Or perhaps something else entirely."
The freckled girl nearest the fire gave a sharp intake of breath.
"Tell us what it is,"
she cried, her fear already melting into excitement.
Are they monsters? Ghosts?
Her question set the others off.
"A story!"
they shouted.
"Tell us a new one!"
Their voices overlapped until the room hummed with their demand. Old Bean leaned forward, his chair giving a long, slow creak. The firelight reached his face and lit his eyes until they gleamed in the dimness.
"Not monsters,"
he said, lowering his voice enough that the children had to quiet themselves to hear.
"No, not monsters. Something far more interesting. A tale of two brothers whose choices carried them to very different ends."
The children stilled. Every one of them knew that sound in his voice. This would not be a simple tale of sprites or goblins. This was something larger.
"Once," Old Bean began, "not so very far from here, there lived two brothers in the realm of Fae-Maryland."
A shiver of recognition went through the room. Fae-Maryland. The very name was enough to set them leaning in. It was not spoken often. Some called it a land of shadows and wonders. Others swore it was no land at all, only a dream that slipped into the world when the veil between things grew thin. But all of them knew it as a place where magic still walked freely and where beings of story and song moved under sun and moon as if they had never left the old world behind.
"These two brothers," Old Bean went on, "were born of the same mother and father, yet they could not have been more different. The elder was Herman. He stood tall, taller than most men of his day, broad as the oak trees that anchor the forest. His shadow stretched long and dark wherever he went, and many who saw it said it carried more weight than the man himself."
At that moment, the youngest child pointed toward the wall with a small gasp. Old Bean's own shadow, thrown by the hearth, seemed, for just a flicker, to reach wider than it should, as though it wished to prove his words true. The old man gave a faint smile but said nothing, and the story pressed on.
"Benjamin was the younger. He was small from the first day and stayed that way, never reaching higher than his brother's knee. His voice was soft and kind, like a stream running between stones. Where Herman's presence filled the room, Benjamin's slipped in quietly, often overlooked, but no less steady for it.
A boy sitting cross-legged in the front asked,
Were they all magical?
His voice carried a note of awe.
In their own way, Old Bean replied, nodding. But not as you might imagine. Not at the beginning.
He leaned back, taking a long sip of cider, and the children leaned forward in turn, pulled closer, without knowing why. His pauses were part of the spell as much as his words.
As the years passed, the brothers chose different paths. Herman, proud and commanding, travelled south and made himself ruler of the southern realm. He built a palace there, and at his side stood Queen Gormandy, as ambitious as she was beautiful. The halls of their home glittered with gold. Its towers shone so brightly the travellers shielded their eyes as they came near. Yet those who stayed long enough soon noticed how quiet the place had become. Music that once echoed through its chambers had faded until only silence and the clink of coins remained.
He shifted his mug, letting the warmth seep into his hands.
Benjamin's northern kingdom could not have been more different. His home was modest. Its walls were plain, its floors simple, but there was music in every street and laughter in every corner. Even the poorest farmer found a song to carry with him as he worked the fields, and the joy of the people filled the land with life.
Which kingdom was happier? Asked one of the older children, his brow furrowed. Old Bean smiled, pleased with the question.
Ah, that is the heart of it. For as Herman and Queen Gormandy gathered more wealth, something was lost. Herman would say, "Another wing for the castle, more land for our rule, more gold for the coffers." And the Queen would nod, her eyes fixed on treasures not yet taken. Each year the palace grew, and each year it grew quieter.
A girl with long braids shook her head.
Didn't they know gold doesn't make people happy?
They'd forgotten that truth, Old Bean said, his eyes softening. Benjamin never forgot. His halls had no grandeur, but they overflowed with song. His people gathered for feasts. They danced at harvest. And even when winter pressed close, their voices warmed the air better than any fire.
He deepened his voice and let it boom across the room as if Herman himself had spoken.
Gold makes life sweet, not these silly tunes and dancing feet. What use is music when winter comes?
A few of the children giggled nervously at the thunder of his voice. Then Old Bean lightened it again, returning to his own calm tone. Benjamin would answer only with a smile.
There are hungers beyond the stomach,
he said,
and protections beyond walls of stone.
The room fell into silence, broken only by the hiss of the fire. The children leaned closer, their breaths held. Finally, a small girl whispered,
What happened then?
Old Bean's eyes gleamed in the firelight, and for an instant the green within them flared bright.
Ah, now we come to the turning, for magic had been watching, and magic does not sit idle forever. Herman, proud Herman, was about to learn what no treasure could teach. It happened on a night much like this one,
Old Bean said, nodding toward the window where the wind clawed at the shutters. His voice dropped to a whisper, and the children instinctively leaned closer, their eyes wide.
Herman lay stretched across his bed of gold. Silks from distant lands draped around him, But sleep gave him no rest. He tossed and turned, his dreams haunted by music. It was his brother's music drifting from the north, light and sweet, as if carried by the wind itself. He tried to block it out, yet the melody clung to him, chasing him even in his sleep. At last, half dreaming, he reached for the comfort he trusted most, the pile of coins beside his bed.
Old Bean clapped his hands together, sudden and sharp. The children gasped, a few clutching at one another.
A pain shot through his body. His great frame bent and shrank inch by inch. The mighty king dwindled. His nightclothes sagged around him, loose as sails without a mast. By morning light, the man who once stood tall as an oak was no taller than 3 feet, the very height of his brother Benjamin.
The children let out a chorus of astonished cries. One boy covered his mouth, his eyes round as saucers.
But that was only the beginning,
Old Bean continued, his voice gaining a strange rhythm that seemed to hum with the fire itself.
For as Herman stared in horror, the gold beside him stirred to life. Coins leapt into the air, whirling like leaves in a storm. They spun faster and faster, a glittering storm of treasure, and he snatched at them with his small hands, crying out, "My gold!" But his reach was too short, his grasp too weak. The coins shimmered in the air, and then, with a sound like rushing wind, they vanished into nothing.
Old Bean lifted his hands and made a slow circling motion. The younger children stretched their arms into the air as if they too might catch those phantom coins before they disappeared.
Herman's robes twisted and changed, Old Bean went on. The silks turned into cloth of the brightest green. His fine boots curled at the toes. Clover-shaped marks crept across his clothing like vines, and the man who had been king was no longer king at all. He had become something else.
He had become a leprechaun,
a boy cried from the back, half thrilled, half afraid.
Indeed, Old Bean said, nodding gravely. One of those clever folk. Tricksters dressed in green, keepers of gold that comes and goes. But in Herman's case, his gold was gone, and all that remained was himself.
A small girl with solemn eyes raised her hand.
And the Queen? What became of her?
Old Bean sighed, his shoulders heavy.
That is a matter of debate. Some say she returned across the sea to the land of her birth. Others say that she found her way north, seeking comfort in Benjamin's realm of music. The truth I cannot tell.
He let the fire crackle for a moment before speaking again. His voice softened.
Herman lived for a time in his brother's kingdom. There he learned the skills of his new form. Illusion, trickery, the ways of the leprechaun. He was not a patient student, but he was clever, and soon enough he grew skilled. Still, the call of independence was strong. He left the north at last, determined to make his own way. From then on, he was known as Herman Green. Oh, his name spread far and wide, bringing both laughter and caution wherever it was spoken.
The room went quiet as the children took this in. The fire hissed and spat. Finally, one small voice asked,
Did he ever find his queen again? or is gold?
Old Bean's eyes twinkled, catching the light in a curious way.
Some say he still searches. Others believe he found new treasures, not of gold but of wisdom. As for me,
he chuckled, the sound warm and strange.
well, I have my own thoughts.
He lifted his mug, and at that moment the flames surged high, spilling emerald light across the room. For the briefest instant, the children saw Old Bean's eyes clear and unmistakable, glowing green, brighter than fire.
Some say Herman Green still walks these very lands,
he said, his voice different now, smoother, lilting.
Some say he tells a story on nights like this, when the wind rattles the shutters.
The freckled girl's mouth fell open.
Are you?
She began, but her words died in her throat. Old Bean's form shimmered. Before their astonished eyes, the stooped elder shrank. His cloak rippled into green cloth. His shoes curled at the toes, and a tall hat with a silver buckle appeared on his head. Where Old Bean had sat, there now perched a figure no taller than 3 feet, his eyes gleaming with mischief.
The gold still dances, said the leprechaun,
his voice carrying the ring of truth at last.
And as for Herman himself, well, here I am.
Before the children could cry out, the leprechaun sprang from the chair with a lightness that belied his size. He leapt toward the corner where the shadows lay thickest, and in a blink, he was gone. Only his laughter remained, echoing against the rafters, and a single silver coin that spun on the floorboards before clinking to rest. The innkeeper, who had been polishing tankards and only half listening, hurried over as the children burst into excited chatter.
What's all this noise? Where's Old Bean off to now?
The children pointed, shouted, explained all at once. Their words tumbled over one another until the innkeeper shook his head in disbelief. He bent to pick up the coin, muttering. But when he held it to the light, his expression changed. It was no coin he had ever seen. Strange markings gleamed on its surface, and it shimmered as though lit from within.